It doesn't. Listen.
Ladies and gentlemen, Rafael Grassetti.
I did it by hand. You're going to see in my work that since I started at the same time I was doing a traditional sculpting, I tend to do a lot of things in like old-fashioned way. I don't use a lot of alpha. I try to, even when I'm doing details, I use the alpha as a reference, as a guide, and I try to do a lot of things by hand because I still like the feeling of like the attention that I can give to details. I don't want to say that's how the most people work in this industry, but that's like how I approach a few things. And looking at this now, I would change a lot of things definitely, but you can actually see like all these meshes are actually, I have a nice topology that I can actually hold in like a cinematic production. Same thing for this one. I started with a sketch in ZBrush, then I went and just retopologized most of the parts inside of ZBrush. And this one, especially, I had a lot of armor that I did in ZBrush that I want the exact same shape in Max at the end. So I could just go and like retopologize everything here, like exactly the shape that I wanted. Same thing for like the legs. So you see everything, there's no really normal mapping here except for all these folds. Everything here, it's topology, and I can have this in a high-res render exactly the way I want it. And if I want to actually animate this, like most of the projects that I work with would do it, I can still do it. I use ZBrush for posing. I can, with the go to Max and go to ZBrush, I can like go between those softwares really fast. And I can pose them without needing to have like a rig or anything. And this one I made 100% in ZBrush. So that's one of the types of work that I'm talking about. Just go ahead, it was the same process as this. I can just go ahead in ZBrush and add, like since it's for a prototyping end result, I can just go ahead and detail, and there's no topology, no technical aspects except for watertight. And ZBrush can do that really easily now, like closing holes and all those boring stuff that you do when you're doing statue work. So I'm gonna show in the video how I approach likeness. This one was work for a toy company named Hasbro. So that was like super small. I had just a couple of days for each. But that's how, I'm gonna show in the video how I approach likeness in ZBrush. I have like a technique that helps. So yeah, that's usually the fun part. So you can go ahead in ZBrush and just do whatever you want, have fun. Don't worry about your base mesh. And then go ahead after you're done, you can just go back and retopologize and bake everything. So I brought this model so you guys can take a look. Just go ahead and play with the shapes. And you're gonna see how I approach those details, like the secondary shapes and the tertiary shapes, how I do each of them. But yeah, I really couldn't work with this and a body in the same scene, so I finished that. And after that, I imported into ZBrush with a flat color and the diffuse map. And with that, I could just work with the body. So you can see here the faces. the faces is the in-game mesh. And then I could just apply the diffuse. So I just bake the diffuse so I can have a reference of the face. And I could go ahead and just sculpt the body. Shape means and where every shape goes. Different from when you're doing like 3D or even ZBrush, a lot of things can hide. Like you can hide a bad anatomy sometimes. But when you're doing clay, you actually have to just understand the shape, like the silhouette, like the movement. And that helps a lot when you're doing traditional sculpture. You have to try to sculpt the face and see, because the first face you're going to do is never going to be your best one, right? Or even the second one, or even the third one. So every single face you do, you're going to get better. You're going to see different things. So just, you got to push yourself to do it, even if you're not going to show, or even if you're not going to post. You just have to try and study. So when the time comes, when the client wants to see, you actually can show all your experience. So I try not to work in one area for too long, because I've done that before, and I know from experience that most of the times I detail something, not detail, but I like refine that, and then when I look to overall, something is off, so I have to do it again. So I try to just go and play with different shapes for like different areas for as long as I can. So now I'm starting to do the face, and you can see I don't worry, like you can see what I'm saying, like I'm just drawing the face the way I think it should be, like from front view, and then I go ahead and fix the side view. Like disable all the layers and go back to the symmetrical model and do the changes, and then go back to my layers. So now ZBrush can duplicate meshes without creating a new subtool, which is pretty good. So I'm just sketching the inside of the mouth. And again, since it's just a sketch, usually if it's a big project, I will just go ahead and max and do like a base mesh with all the teeth and everything as a separated object, and then go ahead in ZBrush and just move that, fix all the shapes and finish it. But now, since it's just a sketch, I can just go ahead and ZBrush and create something. Because that's basically your presentation, right? Usually you spend like 2 months sculpting something, and then in your rendering or your texturing process, you don't show all that you've done. So I just try to take my time, and if I have to redo it, like for example now, I think it's way too bluish, so I just go back and start to adding more like a skin tone to it. And I think later I will just go and erase everything and do it like with textures and then redo it. So yeah, I'm just creating like an alpha. You can see here, I'm creating like an alpha based on the texture, and I use that with a brighter color and just go ahead and drag and drop to the entire piece, and adding all those the things that you cannot do by hand, you can just go ahead and add more realism to the piece. So now I'm just creating like a fur in ZBrush, which is just press like 3 buttons and it's done.
All right, one last one. Any other out there before we make the swap?
Yeah,
that was awesome.
Yeah, that was good.
Give him a round of applause, everyone. Rafael Grassetti.
Put your hands together for Paul Gabriel, my friend, your instructor this evening.
Okay, I can now slice across here, I can slice across here, and the beauty of this is I'm only looking at that, right? So I know what's going to happen is it's going to get nice and crisp there. So when I hit this with the deformation, okay, and we're going to with the open circle, okay, you see that nice crisp line that starts to happen right there? So I know that's how the tool works. You know what, and don't be shy, guys, you can do it more than once, okay? So if I keep going and going and going, right? It's just going to keep getting more crisp and more crisp, right? So now I have a nice crisp line happening. I'm not dealing with any subdivision levels at all, and for me, a lot of times when I'm doing my hard surface, I actually don't deal with really much subdivision levels at all, because I want to start taking advantage of some other features, okay? Because I want to say, you know what, I like this piece, but I want to do some stuff with this, okay? So I'm going to mask that off, all right? And you can see that's masked off, and I'm going to inverse my mask. So what I'm going to do is use the transpose line, and I'm going to say, okay, let's extrude that down in. Right? And because I made a nice cut there, I get a nice line in there. Okay? And then I can say, hey, you know, let's keep having some fun with this. Let's switch to maybe one of the circle brushes. Okay? And this is a circle slice, so I can either do something like that, right? Or if I wanted to, I can come to this curve part, okay? And you see that says centered and squared. Okay? So I turn on square, I'm always going to get a perfect circle. And center means wherever my brush stroke, that's where it's drawing out of. Okay, so now I have something like that, and then I can say, oh yeah, let's use this now. There's going to be another gun right here because we're crazy. And I'm going to pull that up like that, right? And if I want to keep using that same algorithm, I got to remember that those two polygroups are the same, right? So this is actually going to soften that way, right? So if I hit this, see that? And that's up to you if you're looking for that kind of look. If you're not looking for that kind of look, then all I have to do is grab that handy dandy slice curve, right? And I can even just look at this, okay? And let's say I don't want to touch this part, I only want to work on these, okay? I actually like doing this, and then growing out my selection, and then getting rid of that. And then now I can say, okay, let's cut here, and then I can even start doing other cuts. Like, so that's now a hard cut, so it's got a nice little line in there, okay? So I know what's going to happen with that is when I polish it, it's starting to look at that line, so I get that nice, crisp line there. This, and I'm saying, okay, well, what do we want to do? Let's have some fun with this, okay? So it's all based on polygroups, right? So I can say, hey, this side, all right, and this side, I want to play with these two sides, okay? So if I want to, I can polygroup, make them the same, okay? Then I can take this, again, this slice curve, and I can say, let's have some design fun with this now. Let's go ahead and come across, double tap the Alt key, and I get that nice line, so that's how I got that nice surface there, and then come across here. That looks good there. And what I'm thinking of is literally like sci-fi. I'm thinking, well, this ship needs to be made in specific planes. Like, this isn't some big gun thing. I want to say something else right now, but I'm not going to. Okay? It's not some big gun thing here, right? So I'm thinking how they would break up the panels in real life. Now, the cool thing about this brush, if I do this, okay, do you see how this changed polygroup? It was very faint, so I'm going to undo because it was just another green. See that yellow and green, that stayed pink? If I don't go across the whole polygroup, this doesn't change. So I know this, so I'm doing that on purpose. Okay. This kind of thing happening, right? Now all I have to do, and this just shows how untalented I am, okay? And thank you, Pixelogic, for coding this. You're welcome. You're welcome. No, you're welcome, okay? So I have all these awesome options in here. We have so much control here, it's redunculous, okay? So if we just hit panel loops, I instantly get the panel loops, right? Nice and clean, okay? Right? Now that's hard surface right there in a couple clicks, right? So that's really our goal. We want you guys a couple clicks get to these things, okay? So I can start playing with this though. And because I'm only showing this, that's all that's going to get the panels. Nothing else is going to get the panels, okay? So let's really start playing with this, all right? So again, here's that awesome little polish thing with the double circle. So if I do this, it's going to really start softening up pieces and make it even more crisp. All right, so if you go right in there, you're not going to get much more crisp than that. If you think about what I just showed for panel looping, right? So now I can go, okay, let's come out of Dynamesh. We don't need that anymore. And let's just start panel looping, and I start making chest plates instantly. Now I'm starting to think, I want a cooler panel than that, right? So let's start having some fun with the panels. So this is the back to the profile curve. So on the outside, I kind of want it to be a little bit bigger of a gap, and I actually wanted to do this, and then I wanted to come like that, and then be like that. okay? So how I made this nice and crisp, all right, is when I click and drag out and drag back in, it becomes round again. When I click and drag back out, it becomes sharp again, because I obviously want the panels to be sharp. Now, there's a particular slider that is very important, okay? So if you count the dots in here, obviously you have more dots, this correlates with the loops. This is how much geometry loops you're gonna get, right? So when I click panel looping, so you look at my panels now, I'm getting, right, what this profile is, okay? In the transpose line. Okay, so you see this white circle? Okay, that's just there for show. Not really. No. So I want to make, when I run this polishing algorithm, I want to have a nice little border around there, and so I can make a window and push in for a window. Okay? So I want it to be along that line, the window. So when I click this little white circle, see it turns it? So for example, if I want a window to be along this wing, and I click that, see it becomes aligned with the transpose line. Okay? Because then I'm going to start using a feature. Okay, I can say, well, let's only look at this poly group right here, and then let's look at that poly group. Okay, and then now I want it to align across this, hit that, and I want to start using now this rec brush slicing. Say, where do you want your window? And then boom, there's my window, okay? So if I want it to be across, I can make it go across now too, right? And you see it's making two poly groups. So now all I need to do is make these two one poly group, and then now I have a start for my window and some of the features that I've already shown you guys, which I can even mask like this too, right? And then I can just push that in. And then this is how I made those windows. That's our time.
That's a wrap. Paul Gaboury, ladies and gentlemen. Round of applause. Pretty cool, huh?